wow, I'm surprised that Asmongold, the dumbest on the planet, also has been quote unquote duped into believing that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is literally an Israeli and American backed project, both are belligerents in this, by the way. They're belligerent occupants in this, are supporting this further operation by utilizing perfidy, by using the crumb. Anyway, we got more to talk about because Bret Stephens, the New York Times, is back on his bullshit only a week after. I'm a scholar. I know it when I see it. No, Israel is not committing it in Gaza. Of course, one is a renowned Israeli Jewish scholar. The other one is Bret Stephens. Glad that they found a guy who would write this article again. Yes, Bret Stephens is the bedbug guy.
No, Israel is not committing in Gaza. If the Israeli government's intentions and actions are truly genocidal, if it is so malevolent that it is committed to the annihilation of Gazans, why hasn't it been more methodical and vastly more deadly? Why not, say, hundreds of thousands of deaths, as opposed to the nearly 60,000 that Gaza...
First of all, it does have hundreds of thousands of deaths. The 60,000 is a severe underestimation. It's a severe underestimate. And also, the argument that, like, why haven't they killed more is so stupid. Like, this is not an argument. You can't say, like, here, I'll give you an example, okay? With intent is what matters. Actions matter too, of course. But intent and statements from politicians all the way down to the individual actors that are carrying out these atrocities, there needs to be a direct through line established. And the reason for why intent matters in this purpose is because the entire reason for why there is any sort of like legal designation of is so that we stop it before it finalizes, before it's completed. Okay? So the idea that you're like, well, you know, they could have did far more, that's not a reasonable argument. It would be akin to saying, Your Honor, sure, I killed this family, but I could have killed every family on the block, and I didn't. Look at all of these other families that are left unmurdered. I have the capacity to kill all of the other families as well. Does that matter? If you already said that you were going to kill all the other families on the block, it doesn't show your innocence, especially if they stop you before you finish the project. It's akin to Holocaust denial by stating, well, 6 million Jews were killed and 6 million Jews were spared. So I guess that's not a real, it's ridiculous. Why not say hundreds of thousands of deaths as opposed to the nearly 60,000 Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, which does not distinguish between combatant and civilian deaths as cited so far in the nearly 2 years of war? You know who else uses Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry, by the way? This piece of shit, this monster still doing this goddamn nonsense. Israel. You know who also doesn't make distinctions between combatant and civilian deaths? Israel. Bitch. It's not that Israel lacks the capacity to have meted vastly greater destruction than what it has inflicted so far. It is the leading military power in its region, stronger now that it's decimated Hezbollah and humbled Iran. It would have bombed without prior notice instead of routinely warning Gaza to evacuate the areas it intended to strike. It would have bombed without putting its own soldiers, hundreds of whom have died in combat, at risk. Oh my God. This is so stupid because the argument is literally, if it wanted to Gaza, they would have just nuked Gaza. This, of course, requires people to not realize, requires people to turn a blind eye to the fact that Israel has dropped 8 nukes worth of munitions on Gaza, and that one singular nuclear strike would probably end Israel, especially when considering like the fallout as well. Not just the political fallout, I mean like literal radiation. This argument, of course, does not work for Russia. Excuse me, if Russia wanted to, Russia is simply doing a military campaign. A small strategic military incursion is not a full-blown invasion, because after all, if Russia wanted to completely dominate Ukraine, they would just nuke Ukraine. They have a nuclear arsenal. Ukraine doesn't have nukes. It's just a special military operation. If you were to write, that article would never be written in the New York Times. No one would allow that article to be written in the New York Times. Russia is actually denazifying Ukraine. They're fighting Azov troops. Azov are open neo-Nazis. Even the American government has recognized that they're neo-Nazis. You know, it isn't that Israel has been deterred from striking harder by the president of his hostages in Gaza. Israeli intelligence is said to have a fairly good idea where those hostages are being held, which is one reason, which tragic exceptions, relatively few have died from Israeli fire. It's also ridiculous. A shit ton of them have died not only through Israeli bombings, but they've also literally died when Israeli soldiers shot them, like point blank, shot them because they thought that they were Palestinian civilians and not Israeli civilians. And it knows that as brutal as the hostages' captivity them alive, nor is it that Israel lacks diplomatic cover. President Trump has openly envisaged requiring all Gaza to leave the territory, repeatedly warning that all hell will break loose if Hamas didn't return the hostages. As for the threat of the economic boycotts, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has been the world's best performing major stock index since October 7, 2023. With due respect to the risk of Irish boycotts, Israel is not a country facing a fundamental economic threat. If anything, it's the boycotters who stand to suffer. Oh my God, I hate Brett Stevens so much. I can't believe I hate them even more. What? It's getting worse on streaming circles. I heard a certain Texan streamer supporting the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation on a stream 2 weeks ago. I saw it. I got banned for telling his fans the truth on offline chat. The truth. The Roach mods and the streamer supporters. Yeah, no shit, dude. He literally got banned for saying Palestinians are inferior culture that deserve to be annihilated. Wow, I'm surprised that Asmongold, the dumbest on the planet, also has been quote unquote duped into believing that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is literally an Israeli and American backed project, both are belligerents in this, by the way. They're belligerent occupants in this, are supporting this this further operation by utilizing perfidy, by using the crumb of aid delivery to this desperate 600,000 Palestinians who haven't had food in the last day, by the way. 600,000 Palestinians have now had food in the last day. They are so desperate for food. People are dying. Children are dying from famine right now as we speak, every single day. And that starving population is being drip fed at least the promise of aid. And when they go there, walk 14 kilometers to get there, to the aid distribution areas that are handled by American mercenaries, backed up by the Israeli tanks and the Israeli military, they get shot at. I've heard the firsthand account testimonies from Palestinian journalists. They make people sit there after walking 14 kilometers. They make children sit there. They have 10 minutes where there's a green light. And in the first 10 minutes, the aid has already been dished out to the collaborators, the ISIS affiliates. All of the necessary aid like flour and things of that nature have already been distributed to the people that are collaborators with the Israeli state, the ISIS affiliate group, Popular Forces. Okay. And the remaining crumbs of aid, which is also still incredibly limited, is offered to the hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that are desperate for it in a matter of 10 minutes. The green light ends after 10 minutes. A yellow light turns on. The yellow light indicates that you have 5 minutes to disperse. If you do not disperse in the 5 minutes after the yellow light has come on, they shoot you. They open up machine gun fire into the crowd of children, into the crowd of civilians. That's how aid distribution happens at the point of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation aid drops. All the while, there are thousands of trucks with aid waiting on the other side of the Gaza boundary. Israel does not the Gaza Strip. Israel does not allow the previous existing and successful mechanism of aid distribution. Israel does not allow third parties to actually deliver this aid. Another Hebrew-only Ynet piece, this time by a veteran Israeli reporter, Ron Ben Yeshai, is more candid and direct than anything printed in English. It lays out how the Israeli government is starving Gaza and killing those desperate enough to seek food. There are hungry children in Gaza. We need to admit it and immediately change the distribution of aid. This and a few distribution centers were rushed by waves of human tsunami that got out of control, which is why the humanitarian fund failed and why IDF soldiers are forced to shoot at the crowd. The cabinet is responsible for the moral conscious failure and Israel's catastrophic image in the world. This is what happens when people who don't understand security make the decisions. These claims are an insult to the intelligence. Okay? Spokespeople for the Coordinator of Operations of the Territories, COJAT, and the IDF are constantly trying to prove, using numbers and statistics, that there's no reason for there to be hunger in Gaza. Sometimes they imply that the pictures which find their way into the international media are of starving children from Yemen and not from Gaza. These claims are an insult to intelligence, mainly because testimonies from doctors and even from IDF soldiers who spoke to Israeli journalists indicate that Palestinian children are dying of hunger in Gaza and that they are firing live ammunition at Palestinians who come to food distribution centers in self-defense. Self-defense, by the way. How is it self-defense? The soldiers who feel they are being put in danger, even if they are sitting inside a tank, shoot at the crowd, and so there are deaths. How many more testimonies do you need to hear? You hear it from Palestinians when it immediately happens. They film these atrocities that are taking place. You don't believe them. You hear it from IDF soldiers who openly admit that they're shooting into these crowds. You don't believe them. You hear it from American soldiers who quit after they see the atrocities unfold, and you still don't believe it. What more do you need to hear? At a certain point, you have to realize that if you're still listening to someone like Bret Stephens at this point, then you are a genocide denier. You are a Nazi yourself. Okay? You are a neo-Nazi piece of shit. It's that simple. You can cry about that designation all day, every day. But that is who you are. In short, the first question the anti-Israel genocide chorus needs to answer is, why isn't the death count higher? It is higher. But it doesn't matter. Even if it was 60,000, that is an insane thing to state. Oh, it's only 60,000? It's only 17,000 children and babies? Really? Like, think about that. This is saying, oh, come on, guys, it's only 60,000. Why isn't it even higher? First of all, it is higher, but it doesn't matter, because if you have an appetite for 60,000 deaths, if you have permission for 60,000 deaths, that means even if it's 600,000, you don't give a. And if 60,000 is such a low number of deaths for you, 17,000 children is such a low number of death for you, then why should anybody care about October 7? What a ridiculous thing to say. Remember, the very same people that lied about 40 decapitated babies on October 7 have openly entertained thousands, tens of thousands of decapitated children, bombed children, murdered babies. They don't care. They don't care. The lie of 40 decapitated babies on October 7 was covered far more than 17,000 plus children that have been ruthlessly slaughtered. And again, that is an underestimate. Millions are being starved as we speak. The answer, of course, is that Israel is manifestly not committing a genocide, a legally specific and morally freighted term that is defined by the United Nations Convention on Genocide as the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. That is literally what Israel is doing. Note the words intent and as such. Genocide does not mean simply too many civilian deaths, a heartbreaking fact of nearly every war, including the one in Gaza. It means seeking to exterminate a category of people for no other reason than they belong to that category. The Nazis and their partners killing Jews in the Holocaust because they were Jews, or the who. Okay. This, yet again, from a learned person like Bret Stephens, who has a cushy job writing opinion editorial piece for the New York Times. The Nazis didn't just kill Jews because they were Jews. That's what we know now. At the time of the arrests of all Jews, they had obviously spent a good deal of time dehumanizing Jews and offering justifications as to why they must be arrested and apprehended and sent to concentration camps. The idea that the Nazis simply were like, yep, it's time to kill all the Jews now. And then everyone else in society was like, yep, that's right. That's right. It's totally fine. We love being evil. Like the idea that Nazis were running around being like, we love being evil. We're actually bad people. We know that Jews didn't do anything wrong, but we want to kill all of them is idiotic. Of course they lied. Of course they created an environment where people could turn a blind eye to these atrocities. What the heck are you saying? Are you that stupid? Why is there even a need for genocide scholars and for Holocaust scholars in particular if you're just going to revise and make shit up on your own like this? Life is not a Marvel movie, man. When Hamas invaded on October 7, intentionally butchering families in their homes and young people at a music festival, they also murdered Israelis as such. By contrast, the war that over 1 million German civilians died in World War II, thousands of them in appalling bombing of cities like Hamburg and Dresden. Wait, what? Brett Stevens also is saying it's appalling to bomb Hamburg and Dresden, but it's also totally fine when Israel bombs Gaza, which it is the belligerent occupier of, in direct violation of international human rights. What the and made them victims of a war, but not of genocide. The aim of the Allies was to defeat the Nazis for leading Germany into the war, not to wipe out the Germans for simply being German. No, dog. That's the argument you make when American allied forces bomb Tel Aviv, because Israel is the Nazi equivalent in this conversation. Israel is the one doing a genocide. It wasn't Hamas or the Palestinian resistance forces that did a genocide on October 7. What the? In response, Israel's inveterate critics note the scale of destruction in Gaza. They also point a handful of remarks by a few Israeli politicians undermining the statements made by Benjamin Netanyahu, Yoav Galan, who was the defense minister at the time, and virtually every single Israeli security cabinet and war cabinet member is insane. Oh, guys, it wasn't a Holocaust. Only Hitler and a handful of other Germans said mean things about the Jews. Calm down. They had no intent to destroy the Jews. Ridiculous. But furious comments in the wake of Hamas' October 7 atrocities hardly amount to a Wannsee conference, and I'm aware of no evidence of an Israeli plan to deliberately target and kill Gaza civilians. Yeah, you're aware of an Israeli plan to deliberately target and kill Gaza civilians. It's every Israeli politician with the exception of like a handful. What the do you mean you're not aware? The Israeli Knesset just voted to permanently annex the West Bank. The Israeli Knesset yesterday had an entire meeting about the complete relocation, the complete ethnic cleansing of all Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, with plans to rebuild the Gaza Strip as a part of Israeli territory. That happened yesterday. What do you mean? As for the destruction in Gaza, it is indeed immense. There are important questions to be asked about the tactics Israel's used, most recently when it comes to chaotic food distribution system. It is attempted to set up as a way of depriving Hamas of the control of the food supply. Even then, he's trying to use the pro-Israeli position. Oh, it's just a way to try and set up Hamas. Even though every single third party, Israel allowed humanitarian organization that has previously operated in the Strip has openly stated that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is simply using aid, limited amount of aid, to a starving population that it has starved itself, as a mechanism to kill more Palestinians. It has nothing to do with Hamas, dipshit. No one thinks it has anything to do with Hamas. You're just simply lying. This is Nuremberg style Israeli defense. You should be tried under international courts for this level of atrocity denial. This level of genocide denial requires some kind of criminal trial. Okay? You should be in prison for this. Hardly any military in history has gone to war without at least some of its soldiers committing war crimes. That includes Israel in this war. In America, and nearly all of our wars, including World War II, when some of our greatest generation bombed schools accidentally or murdered POWs in cold blood. But bungled humanitarian schemes or trigger-happy soldiers or strikes that hit the wrong target or politicians reaching. Dude, it's not. After the 30th hospital bombing, you have to realize that it's deliberate. It's not an accident. Israel doesn't even say it's an accident. They just literally say Hamas. That's it. This is why it's actually really unique to be an Israel defender in the West, in the United States of America, because you have to hope that your target audience that's reading this is oblivious to, one, the facts on the ground, and two, Israel's own admissions. Because the only way that you can still defend pure evil like this at this stage, 21 months into a genocide, into an ethnic cleansing campaign, a genocide, is if you just openly say, nah, dude, we have to do it. These guys are all parasitic, monstrous, barbaric villains that need to be excised. Okay? And that is what Israel says. Israel gets away with saying shit like that, and Israeli politicians get away with saying shit like that because they know they're not going to get punished for it by the public. The public agrees with them. Now, yes, there are naysayers. There are people who have definitely taken a stronger stance 20 months in. But this kind of idiotic way of defending Israel requires people that read the New York Times to not know anything. I need to see the comments on this. Why hasn't Israel killed more Palestinians? Because its strategy is to destroy the entire Gaza Strip, rendering it uninhabitable and forcing Palestinians to leave or die. Their strategy is the annihilation of the Palestinian people. Let's look at the reader picks. What do you call it when people are first intentionally starved, then shot while trying to get food? I find this piece of semantic parsing beyond the pale of anything we might consider humane, decent, or otherwise thoughtful. It is clear what Israel under Netanyahu intends, the gradual and inexorable cleansing of Gaza of the Palestinian people. Stevens is an apologist for the Israeli right wing. This has been clear long before the events of October 7. So then, what is the term for a situation where soldiers are explicitly targeting and shooting displaced people of a specific ethnicity, including children who are in the process of simply trying to collect food rations? Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, this was on October 8, by the way. I've ordered a complete siege on the Gaza Strip. There will be no electricity, no food, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. The genocidal intent is clear, especially when Netanyahu publicly calls for ethnic cleansing and compares Palestinians to biblical Amalek. Brett, you're wrong. This is such a shameful piece. Are you seriously saying Israeli forces aren't destroying enough civilian structures or killing enough innocent children to warrant condemnation? I feel like Tommy Lee Jones in the masterpiece film No Country for Old Men. I don't know how to confront this evil. This fight is overwhelming, exhausting, and the lies by Brett Stevens in the New York Times confirm that I'm truly living in a world I don't truly understand anymore. When will it be genocide? When the entirety of the Gaza Strip is in Israeli control? When Palestinian communities have been completely supplanted to be Israeli settlers in the West Bank? If 60,000 enough deaths, will 600,000 be enough? Will Brett take a stab at setting the minimum parameters for when we can finally declare genocide, or really just keep moving the goalposts? Instead of coming to terms with the horrific crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza, let's obfuscate the issue with a discussion of what people should call it. Is a deliberate, systematic attempt to remove Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank by any and all means. Tens of thousands of innocents have been killed. Hundreds of thousands are being starved. But let's not cheapen the word genocide. Nice try. As the comments show, no one is buying this nonsense. Putting a definitional fig leaf on a deliberate policy of mass murder is a transparently absurd way to shield Israel from the condemnation its actions merit. Please stop accusing me of anti-Semitism simply because I'm aware of the horrific violence that Israel is committing against innocent civilians, that 60% of fatalities are women and children, that they now inflict starvation, that they shoot innocent people intentionally. It is not appropriate to be disgusted, gut-sick, and burdened by the genocide. Genocide it is, according to Amnesty International, United Nations Special Committee, Doctors Without Borders, Human Rights Watch. Most scholars of genocide by now, and scholars of international law, agree that what we are seeing in Gaza is now a genocide. Calling this anti-Semitic is to identify Judaism with God's forsaken violence. Be careful how you sling your labels. You are on the wrong side of history, sir. Like a Jewish lady named Debbie, that is an avid enough reader of the New York Times, is commenting on a Brett Stevens article. It's over. It's over. It's done. You got the Deborahs coming out against you. It's done. Let it go. You are on the wrong side of history, sir. As a Jewish person, I'm aghast and ashamed by people like you defending the slaughter and destruction of innocent people. I'm in my 50s, but I was raised with the concept of never again, not just for Jews, but for everyone. And with the idea that because we had to experience it, we could help keep it from happening to others. The policies you support are not only causing grave harm to human lives, but they're reflecting back on the Jewish people. How will others judge us? How will God judge us? Now, my expectation isn't that the Deborahs and the Barbaras and the readership of the New York Times is going to take my position on this, or even come to terms with the reality that this kind of violence, of course, will create some kind of reaction, a violent retaliation, which is ironically how we arrived at Hamas and we arrived at October 7 to begin with. They're probably not going to get to that level, but it doesn't matter because even they see what is going on. Even they recognize that it is unconscionable. Yeah. The New York Times naturally has zero Arab or Muslim staff columnists who write on foreign affairs who could respond. This is true, by the way. I hope you understand. The New York Times has many people employed that write about Israel that have either direct connections to Israel or have people that served in the IDF or are currently immediate family members that are serving in the IDF that write for the Israeli side of things. On the other hand, the New York Times literally has zero Arab or Muslim writers because they are asked at the point of entry, they are asked to not be on the foreign policy side that pertains to Israel because they are too biased. There are numerous people in the editorial board of the New York Times that are directly connected to or have served or have immediate family members that have served in the Israeli military. Yeah, here it is. New release dossier reveals material and ideological connections between the Israeli occupation and the staff of the New York Times, including journalists, editors, and executives. They're either tied to Zionist think tanks or have worked in Zionist think tanks or have served in the Israeli occupying force or have children that are serving in the On the other hand, New York Times writers are literally asked how biased they would be if they are of Arab descent or are Muslim when covering Israel. and Middle Eastern related issues, but specifically Israel. If an outlet had this many ties to Russia or Al Qaeda as the New York Times has to Israel and the IDF, their only competitor would be the Epoch Times. What is this? New York Times design is 100%, but doing what about us BS ruins your point. Let's reflect on the fact that the New York Times handed out a Pulitzer for covering up 4 million people starved to death by Moscow. Being a rich Westoid pitting oppressed people against each other is in fact just as shitty. Yeah, the difference is this person is right. The Epoch Times does not camouflage its editorial slant the way that the New York Times does. This is Der Strömer at this point. One must remember the editor-in-chief of Der Strömer was literally convicted in Nuremberg, okay? Was tried in Nuremberg for its Nazi propaganda and its dehumanization of Jews that led to the Holocaust. A direct line. Remember that. Remember that. The dehumanization of Jews that was commonly found that allowed the Holocaust to happen, the people responsible for that were tried and also found guilty of participating, playing a formative role in the Holocaust. Something to consider if you can't get yourself to change trajectory on the morality of the situation, then maybe self-preservation will play a role in you doing the right thing. I remember when Bret Stephens wrote about the disease of the Arab mind. Does he think Israeli society has anything to work on? The least impressive point of view to me is when you argue your side is perfectly virtuous victims and the other side is flawed and irredeemable. Friendly reminder that Bret Stephens once did write an article about how Ashkenazi Jews are genetically superior and smarter to others. This is from the Columbia Journalism Review. This would be an anti-Semitic article nowadays. To ever call into question someone who is writing extensively about the genetic superiority of Ashkenazi Jews and the high IQs that they have, like they're a race scientist neo-Nazi. A growing majority of genocide and Holocaust scholars, human rights organizations, and international law experts all agree that Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza, but opinion columnist and avowed Zionist Bret Stephens disagrees. Luckily, you get to decide on who to believe. A rabid dog. That's what Bret Stephens is. Disgusting little freak. Speaking of rabid dogs and disgusting little freaks, I had to talk about this guy. Okay. Oh, wait, hold on. I have Alonzo Grimendi's assessment here. The article makes two main claims. If it doesn't look like the Holocaust, it can't be genocide. If it were genocide, Israel will kill more people. Both make little sense. First, no genocide looks like the Holocaust, just like no genocide looks like the Rwandan genocide or the Herero genocide. There are common aspects and patterns, but genocide does not come with a franchising manual. Russia's kidnapping and transferring of Ukrainian children to Russian families is also genocidal under international law. It looks nothing like the Holocaust. What it has in common is the intent to destroy another group. Russia does not believe that Ukrainians exist as a people. The belief that the Holocaust must be the blueprint for all future genocides is rooted in the belief that it was singularly different from all other mass killings because it had no other ulterior political motivation. It was just pure apolitical hatred. That's wrong, by the way. That's wrong. These guys don't realize, for some weird reason, that there were decades of buildup of dehumanization of Jews built on top of thousands of years of anti-Semitism that they could rely on to single out Jews as the responsible party for all of the issues that German society was facing. They didn't just overnight decide one day Jews are bad, and actually Jews aren't even bad. They're good people, but we want to kill them because we're bad. That's not how this works. And I guess the reason why they can't come to terms with that is because if they do come to terms with that, it's a somber reminder that it is exactly the same thing that they are doing to Arabs and Muslims in general, all Palestinians in general, but all Arabs across the board. That's it. That's exactly the same shit. That is exactly what Israel and Israel defenders are doing globally that the Nazis did to the Jews. First, you create an environment of anti-Semitism. You take advantage of pre-existing anti-Semitic leanings and teachings. You have to create an environment where it is justified to do untold amounts of atrocities to these people. We are already at the point of untold amounts of atrocities happening to these people. The only major difference here between what happened in the Holocaust and what's happening now is that we know that they're being slaughtered. We know that the Palestinians are being slaughtered. as opposed to the plausible deniability for many people around the globe that did not know the extent of the death camps. I won't say that about, German society broadly. And so if Israel or Russia are the Spanish conquistadors and the U.S. cowboys have another political goal, defeat Hamas, defend its sphere of influence to spread Christianity or manifest destiny, then their actions are not like the Holocaust and so not genocidal. This is why Rwanda has been accepted as a genocide too. It is seen as Hutus irrationally and apolitically hating the Tutsi. But this is not how genocide works. No genocide is entirely apolitical. Mahmoud Mamdani has already shown how dimension to the Hutu killing Tutsis brought about by the social order imposed in Rwanda by Belgian colonization. Similarly, in the Holocaust, Dirk Moses has shown how the Nazi extermination of the world's Jews was framed through a murderous need to secure permanent security from a racialized threat. Jews were considered ruthless cosmopolitans that were trying to destroy German civilization from within. All of the economic instability and all the economic volatility that German society was experiencing post-World War I was directed back in the form of enmity towards a vulnerable population of Jews. That's it. Yes, that is Zohran's dad, by the way. So yes, no genocide looks like the Holocaust, not even the Holocaust. Holocaust exceptionalism is an old concern in genocide studies. The discipline is moving away from it because its inevitable result is the belief that there can only be one genocide in history, the Holocaust. Second, the idea that Israel is somehow not doing enough to qualify as genocide is honestly perverse. What more does it need to do? Gaza is uninhabitable. The vast majority of homes, hospitals, universities, etc. destroyed for the purpose of making Palestinian life impossible. That it did not happen quickly enough or more systematically or with gas chambers or in any other preferred way sounds more like snuff fantasy than legal or political analysis. At the end of the day, this is a question that can be asked of any genocide. It's like saying, Your Honor, I murdered this person with my bare hands, as opposed to that other person who shot this victim with a gun. So what I did is not murder. What that person did is murder. It's still murder. I hate Palestine. Keep going, Israel. Dave Smith, Hasan, a little Arab. Oh, okay, man. I don't know what to tell you. Hosmer is no longer effectively disseminated on these publications. That's true, but I'm sorry to break it to you, but the propaganda is now being spread by your peers on this platform, and the king of cockroaches is literally making a case for Israeli defense systems. I don't care what that moron has to say about the defense of Israel. Why the do you? He knows that the walls are closing in on him. He knows that he can't hold on to this like pro-Trump, pro-Israel position for as long as he has. Once that horse is spent, he will move on to the next. He'll go back to talking about titties in video games. Shut the up. Okay? That's it. For him, it's not a matter of ideological consistency. He doesn't give a shit about Israel. He doesn't care about Jews. He doesn't care about anything. He just cares about having people like him. He cares about an environment of positive support that he gets. And he recognizes that if he grabbed onto the Trump train, that he could get many benefits out of it. And he has. But even the smoothest of brains recognize what Israel is doing is atrocious. Stop. Every single thing that every single YouTube content creator has said will be remembered. Okay? Even if people try to distance themselves from Donald Trump, or even if they later on act like they were always on board with the Palestinian cause, we will remember. You will remember. People have spent countless hours. My former podcast co-host, for example, still to this day does not realize how different the media environment is and how not receptive most audiences are to this wishy-washy Israel's doing a genocide, but also all of Israel's enemies are far worse than Israel ever could be. And anyone who actually speaks out against the atrocities of Israel in the terms that are necessary, in the appropriate terms. When I say this is vile, when I say a society that allows genocide is a vile society, when I say that about Nazi Germany, no one sheds a tear. No one even bats an eye. But when I say that about Israel, hold on now. Why? Does Israel have a special status? It does not. Come them. Do you understand? Time will reveal their depravity. What is this?
Exposing a clear conflict of interest in this guy's content and his personal life is journalistic interest. It's why, for example, I can tell you that the YouTuber Zoomer Historian, a neo-Nazi history YouTuber, is this guy, Sam Wilkes. I can tell you this because it is within journalistic interest to do so, even though he did not release his information himself publicly. Just like how I can tell you that Willie Mack Show is William McConville, and he is getting married to a Yale. Now, I am not going to give you the full name of the person he's getting married to,
What
but I
is
can
this?
tell you she is Israeli, and she was assigned to him by...
Best to skip, to be honest. This is drama slop empanada content. Yeah, I don't really give a shit about. I don't care. Anyway, as I was saying, time will already show the depravity of these people. I'm sure that there are still plenty of people. That are in those communities that think to themselves like, well, I don't really like Israel, but you know who I hate more? Hasan. You know? But slowly but surely, they will inevitably realize that what Israel is doing is completely untenable, completely indefensible. And they will either quietly change their perspective and act as though they never said those things in the past, or they'll shut up. That's it. They already have shut up. So when you guys send me this kind of shit, all you're basically doing is relitigating it. You're giving them additional reason to come after me and make more slop. Let them keep chirping. Let them show their own depravity in broad daylight. Who gives a... History will vindicate us. It already has. I don't even care about that vindication, though. What I care about is putting an end to this bloodshed. Okay? If the conquistadors had wanted to genocide the Inca, why did they build reducciones where indigenous communities were ethnically cleansed and relocated closer to the places of forced labor? If the cowboys had wanted to do genocide of the Native Americans, why did they not go village to village, assassinating every man, woman, and child in them? Why goad these communities into war? Why sign treaties for the land? If the Hutu had wanted to genocide the Tutsi, why did they not organize better to kill them en masse? Why use radio to encourage people to kill others with machetes instead of gathering masses of Tutsis and killing them centrally? This can be done even with the Holocaust. In fact, Holocaust deniers do so, often feeding into the genocide denial arguments feel simply wrong and perverse to victims of genocide. The fact is that Palestinian life is impossible in Gaza today. People are dying because Israel's imposed on them conditions of life calculated to bring about the destruction of Palestinians in Gaza, at least in part, as part of a colonization campaign. That's monstrous enough. There really is no need to fantasize about what would have made the destruction of Palestinians more widespread or faster. It's a disturbing talking point that dehumanizes Palestinians and makes whoever makes the argument appear completely devoid of humanity as well. The article wraps up by saying that not everything can be genocide because then genocide will lose its gravitas. The reality is the reverse. In our world, in the hegemonic view of global powers, nothing is ever genocide. That is how genocide loses its gravitas. Rwanda wasn't genocide while it was happening. The U.S. could only tell the press that it saw genocidal acts at best. So it's literally the other way around. If nothing is genocide, then what does the word genocide even mean? The entire purpose of the legislation and the rules surrounding what is declared a genocide is there, and the importance of intent is there so that we can put a stop to it before it finalizes, before it completes. Okay? Oh.